Hello and welcome to Life Lived Well. My name is Christy and I am so happy that you've joined me today. On this channel, I talk about all things lifestyle, some beauty, a little tech, and how that all relates to wellness. So if that sounds like your type of content, I encourage you to subscribe, ring the bell so that you will be notified as soon as I upload a new video. All right, so I've been teaching English online for almost 3 years, and today I want to start a series talking about teaching online, specifically the ESL industries. I'll also cover teaching online in general, just a little bit, but today I've got a lot of information to cover that will just talk about the ESL industry. So I'll probably split these up into a few different videos and make it easier and more reasonable to navigate. And just bear with me, my eyes are going to be darting around a little bit. I've got some notes over here, I've got some notes on my screen. And as you can probably tell, this is one of my very first videos. So let's go ahead and get into this. So first, let's talk about why teach English online. What are the pros and cons? Are you even a good fit? Will you like it? Let's go ahead and talk about some of these issues. So the pros and cons of teaching online. First, let's talk about the pros, because of course that's what everybody thinks about initially. First pro, I would say, is just like any business, you basically are in charge of your own schedule, sort of, and we'll get into that. You get to work from home, which I think is a huge benefit, and that was one of the biggest reasons I started teaching online. It's relatively low stress. It is a great side hustle, especially for teachers. There are a lot of us that do make it a primary job and our primary source of income, but there are some ways to navigate that. So we'll talk about that later in the series, but it's definitely a great side hustle, and especially for those that are already teaching and maybe need some hours in the summer, and maybe for those that are just needing a little bit of extra income for their family. The hours. So typically, people that teach online are teaching children that are in China. There are other companies that offer classes to students from other countries other than China, but primarily we're going to be looking at the Chinese ESL industry. And these hours can be great if you're really motivated and want to get your work kind of done and begin your day like around 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning. Now, be mindful that those times are US Central Time. So, of course, if you're teaching on the West Coast, it can make it a whole lot earlier. If you're teaching on the East Coast of the US, then you get to start a little bit later. And if you're elsewhere in the world, of course, you can do the time conversion yourself. But for some people, that can be a huge benefit if you're trying to just, get that extra bit out of your day and make a little extra money. That can be really beneficial. The students. So I was surprised at how lovely it is to teach students online. I am not a teacher by training. I come from the environmental industry. I come from the tech industry. I work with adults, and any of the teaching experience that I've had in the past has always been with adults. It's always been live. So I really wasn't sure about teaching children. In fact, I was pretty sure I didn't want to teach children for many years, but it has been such a joy. And there's something about, for me anyway, the safety of being online that just makes it really great. The other thing that can be really interesting is teaching for a foreign company. So I have taught students in China. So that means I've worked for a few Chinese companies. I've also worked for one Turkish company. And I just find it so interesting to learn about other people, other cultures without necessarily having to travel, which has been exceptionally beneficial during our pandemic season that has lasted a while. So that I think is a really great benefit, especially if you are a traveler or you've wanted to travel. This is a way of getting to just get an inside look at different cultures without necessarily having to physically be there. That also, I think, is a benefit. Again, the online, the remote teaching. I'm personally a lot more comfortable with children when they're on the other side of a camera and not like all up physically. You don't feel like you're working in a petri dish like you might at school, or perhaps in some other like camp environment. So those I would say are all the pros. I'm sure there are many more, and if you are an online teacher, I encourage you to go ahead and post your comments. Let us know why you like teaching English online or just teaching online in general. Now let's get into some cons. All right, so you'll hear a lot of the same cons as what I said for the pros. So with anything, you're going to have, the good side of the coin and then the negative side of the coin. So I would say one of the cons could be teaching online, teaching from home. Those of you that are a lot more extroverted and really feed off of that classroom energy or feed off of that socialization with or socializing with your coworkers, you don't really get that. And you just don't have the day to day contact with people that you might, or that you definitely would in a brick and mortar setting. So that can be a con for some people. Again, I consider it a benefit, but for some people, if you're more extroverted, that would definitely be a con. The other thing that can be a con, we talked about, being your own boss, setting your own hours. These positions are almost always contractor positions. I've never had a an ESL online teaching experience where I've actually been an employee of a company. So for me, it's always been an independent contractor. And these are just not exceptionally stable jobs. You definitely are not going to get any benefits, and when you're gone, you're gone. When you're sick, you're sick. There is no making, taking sick leave, making money while you're on vacation, unless, of course, you take your work with you, which, because this is an online job, that can be a huge benefit, is taking your laptop and being able to work while you travel. Let's talk about those hours. So, I did talk about how that can be a huge benefit for people. If you want to wake up early, knock out some hours, hustle in some money, and then get on with the rest of your day, this can be awesome. If you do not like to get up early and you are only going to be working for China or predominantly working in China, this may not be for you. So the hours can start as early as 3 a.m. Now, if you are in the west coast of the US and you are teaching in the fall, you theoretically could start as early as 2 a.m., which is crazy. You also could teach overnight if you're teaching their morning. So some weekends will actually have those night hours. I typically don't work in the evening shifts because I work in the morning and I need sleep. That's all there is to it. So that, again, getting sleep can be a challenge, and it can be really tempting to just book all of those slots and not sleep. But that will catch up to you very quickly. I do know some teachers that have done that, and the burnout is real. And that, if we go back to that teaching online, even though you may be actually teaching maybe a couple hours a day. So maybe you open 4 slots, maybe you open 6 slots, and typically it's about 25 to 30 minutes per slot that you're teaching. So let's say you're teaching 4 hours and you're not used to being online and engaging with somebody for that amount of time consistently. It can be really tiring. It can give you a headache. It can just be hard on your throat depending on how you're teaching. It's just a lot of energy to be giving to people consistently. During the pandemic, I saw a couple of articles that talked about the fatigue that people have been experiencing having back-to-back meetings, and Zoom calls, or FaceTime meetings. And it's because you're having to keep that attention on a person, on a thing, without, you know, breaking away. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And when you first start, if you choose to go this route, or maybe if you've just started, that can be something to take into account, and maybe just open a couple of slots per day at a time and kind of build up your stamina. In fact, a lot of the companies will do this for you naturally. They just kind of want to see how you're doing before they book you into a full, you know, set of slots or full day. Again, that can be another con, is that if you are going from one industry to the online teaching industry, you probably will not get hours immediately. A lot, the companies are very different in how they book, and that will be something that we talk about. But it is something to just keep in mind, that you may want to keep your job. I know I did. I was working for Apple in one of their retail stores, and I kept my Apple job for about a month before I felt comfortable enough to quit and say, okay, this is for me. I'm getting enough hours, I'm getting enough pay, this is actually a real thing. And then I quit my retail job. So I do recommend that you kind of keep that in mind as you go through this process. All right. So the other thing about hours is, because we're dealing with school children, their hours are limited. So the peak times that you would be teaching in China are really just a few hours a day. So even if you had the stamina, the desire, the will, the time, all the things, their schedules are actually going to be condensed. So I mentioned I get out about 9 a.m. That's in the spring. In the fall, I would get out about 8 a.m. or even earlier. The Chinese government has limited the amount of hours that teachers are allowed to teach in China, because they want the children to go to bed and they want them to get well rested, which I think is completely reasonable. Right. So one way around the not getting enough hours issue is to work for multiple companies and to work for countries that are outside of China. Some people do this by opening up slots in things like OutSchool, where you can teach any subject and you can teach primarily US students if you would like. There's some companies in Korea, there's some companies, like I mentioned earlier, in Turkey, in Russia. There's a host of them. They're just not as common as the ones in China. And in one of the later videos, maybe even a little bit at the end of today, we'll talk about some resources and how do you find those other companies to kind of fit in to make a more full schedule. All right, let's talk about those sweet students. So, as I said, there's a flip side to every coin. And while the students are amazing and they're brilliant and they're sweet and they're funny, you also get your share of students that are they're just naughty. Some of them are funny naughty, and some of them are annoying naughty, and some of them are just rude. You also, if you're teaching some of the upper levels, you might get, that preteen attitude. You might get the 3-year-old that just screams through the entire lesson. You will often get the overbearing parent who wants to coach the child all the way through the class or help the teacher teach. These are just a tiny fraction of the issues that you can have teaching online. And depending on how many of these students you get per day or per week, it can really affect your mood. It can affect your performance. A lot of these companies, most of these companies, are going to keep records of your performance. And sometimes your schedule is based on this, how many slots you can open, sometimes your bonuses, or a host of things can be tied to your performance, which sometimes can just be tied to what is the mood of this student or this parent. So that can be really difficult. And it can just frankly be difficult to teach children that are being difficult. All right, let's also talk about teaching for a foreign company. So I mentioned how cool that can be and getting to know other people from other cultures, but it is also very different working for a Chinese based or another company that is based in another location. We're used to our HR departments, our contracts, our laws, rules, social mores. And when you're working, especially when you're basically just chatting online or emailing with these companies. We use Ding Talk a lot, which is like a Chinese messaging app. When I was working for the company in Turkey, we used Skype a lot, but we just basically chatted back and forth. The nuances, of course, can be really important when you're communicating that way, and sometimes they can come off as being very short, and who knows how we can come off. So that can be tricky. It is also tricky not having really any legal recourse. Let's face it, when you're depending on a paycheck that's coming from China, and oh, there's a Chinese holiday, and oh, the banks are all closed, and your paycheck is going to be a week or so late. There's literally nothing you can do. And one thing that I do recommend is doing a lot of research on these companies, because some of them are great. They pay on time, they're well established, their staff is responsive and helpful. And then you get other companies that will completely ghost you. They may not have the best track record in terms of payment. They may do things like mid contract give you a pay cut. So I definitely encourage you to check out the companies, do a little bit of investigating. You're more than welcome to email me or put some comments in and ask about specific companies. There are some great resources on Facebook. That's predominantly where I get information about different companies. There are some great video resources. I highly, highly, highly recommend my mentor's channel. That's Teacher Lexi. I will make sure to put a link in the description below to her channel. She's got just tons of great information about many different companies. She's kind of an addict when it comes to working for different ESL companies, which is awesome because we get the benefit of all of her pioneering efforts. All right, so I think that is it for the biggest pros and the biggest cons that I can think of. I'm sure there are things that I did not mention, and if I have some big like realizations, I will add them to my later videos. I also will be posting a blog, and I am in the process of getting that done. Once it is posted, I will also include that in the links below. And I think that is a great place to wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining me today. I just really appreciate you tuning in and learning all things about the ESL industry. Stay tuned for future videos. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. If you are interested in applying like right away, I will go ahead and leave my referral links to the companies that I happen to work for. I also encourage you, whether it's for my companies that I work for or other companies, um, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but I highly recommend getting a mentor that can help you through that application process. And just let me know if you use my referral link so I can be sure to help you through that process. All right, everyone, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great day.